They thought you'd come crawling back. They thought silence was a phase, something you'd grow tired of, something that would break before they ever had to face themselves. But here's what a narcissist never tells you, what they don't even understand about themselves until it's far too late. Your absence isn't just quiet, it's a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. If you're an empath who has ever walked away from someone who drained you dry, who fed on your empathy like it was oxygen and they were suffocating without it, this is for you. Because what happens after you leave is not what you think. It's not relief for them. It's not freedom. It's the beginning of a reckoning they spent years running from. Let me take you inside it. When you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you become their emotional life support system. Not metaphorically, literally. Every compliment you gave, every ounce of patience, every time you excused their cruelty because they're just going through something. You were feeding a void that can never actually be filled. Narcissists don't have a stable sense of self. What they have instead is a hunger. And empaths, with their boundless capacity to love, to forgive, to see the good in people who show them very little of it, are the perfect feast. So when you leave, something strange happens. At first, they don't panic. At first, they perform indifference like it's an Olympic sport. They'll tell their friends you were too sensitive. They'll tell themselves you were never that special anyway. They might even replace you within weeks, sometimes days. Because the emptiness inside them cannot sit still. It needs a new source, a new supply. But here's the part they don't expect. Here's the part that changes everything. The new person isn't you. And slowly, quietly, in moments they don't talk about, in the 3 a.m. silences when the phone isn't ringing and the applause has died down, they start to notice the difference. The new supply doesn't know their patterns yet, doesn't know how to anticipate the mood shifts, doesn't know when to go quiet and when to reassure. You knew. You knew because you spent years studying them, adapting yourself, shrinking and expanding to keep the peace. That wasn't love they were getting from you. Well, it was love, but it was also labor. Invisible, exhausting labor. And nobody replaces that overnight. This is where the unraveling begins. Because narcissists build their identity on external validation, on being seen as the smartest person in the room, the most charming, the most desired. And you, without even meaning to, without ever intending it as a weapon, become the missing validation once you're gone. Not because you were perfect, not because the relationship was healthy, but because your absence creates a hole shaped exactly like the version of themselves they used to perform for you. And that's the trap they walk into. They don't miss you. Let me say that again, because it matters. They don't miss you. The real, complicated, fully human you. They miss the audience. They miss the stage. They miss having someone whose entire nervous system was tuned to their frequency. Someone who flinched when they were upset and lit up when they were pleased. You were their mirror, their applause, their proof that they mattered. And mirrors don't just disappear without consequence. Here's something almost nobody talks about. Something that will change how you see every narcissist you've ever loved. They experience your absence as a kind of death. Not because they loved you the way you deserve to be loved, but because a part of their constructed identity dies with your departure. The version of themselves that existed through your eyes. The charming one. The misunderstood genius, the wounded hero. That version needs a witness to survive. And when the witness leaves the theater, the performance means nothing. So what do? They scramble. Quietly, sometimes not so quietly. Some send the late-night texts, "I just want to know you're okay." Some go silent for months and then resurface right when you've finally found peace, right when your life has started to feel like yours again. That timing isn't coincidence. Somewhere in their nervous system, they can sense it. They can sense when the hook has lost its grip, and something in them can't tolerate that. But this is where your absence becomes something far more powerful than revenge, far more powerful than anything you could have said in a final argument. it becomes evidence, because now alone with nothing to perform for, they're forced to sit with the one audience they've spent their entire life avoiding: themselves. And that is the most dangerous room a narcissist can ever walk into. Some of them shatter completely. Some spiral into behavior so erratic their friends start to notice the mask slipping. The mask they've spent years perfecting. Some throw themselves into new relationships so fast it looks less like moving on and more like running. Running from what, exactly? From the silence. From the question your absence forces them to ask and never answer if she or he really did love me the way I claimed to deserve. Why does it feel like something in me is missing now that they're gone? That question is the beginning of the unraveling. And it doesn't happen in a week. It doesn't happen in a month. It happens slowly, in the accumulation of moments where the new supply fails to measure up, where the friends stop believing the story, where the mirror that used to reflect their greatness back at them stays dark no matter how hard they perform. And somewhere in that darkness, something even they never expected starts to take shape. They don't call it grief. Narcissists rarely have the language or the willingness to call anything by its true name. But that's exactly what it is. A grief with no funeral, no witnesses, no permission to be spoken aloud. Because admitting the loss would mean admitting they were capable of losing something real in the first place. And that admission threatens the entire architecture of who they've built themselves to be. So instead, it leaks out sideways. It shows up as rage at people who have nothing to do with you. It shows up as a sudden, obsessive need to prove they're doing great. The vacation photos posted a little too eagerly. The new relationship announced a little too fast. The carefully curated image of a life that looks, from the outside, like triumph. But watch closely, because this is where the mask always slips. Triumph doesn't need an audience this badly. Genuine peace doesn't perform. What you're witnessing isn't happiness. It's damage control. And here's the part that will genuinely surprise you if you've spent years believing you were the only one who suffered in that relationship. Narcissists are, in their own twisted way, haunted by the people who leave them. Not haunted by love, haunted by unfinished business. Because in their internal world, relationships aren't really about connection. They're about control, about narrative, about being the one who gets to write the ending. And when you leave first, when you close that book without asking their permission, you take the pen out of their hand. That's the part they can't stand. Not you, the pen. This is why so many narcissists resurface months, sometimes years, later, always at the exact moment your life has quietly stabilized without them. It's not romantic longing. It's a compulsion to reclaim authorship. To rewrite the story so it ends the way they need it to with them as the one who left, the one who grew, the one who's changed. And sometimes, chillingly, they'll even believe it themselves. But here's what they never expected. Here's the twist buried underneath all of it. Change, real change, requires something a narcissist's entire defense system is built to prevent: the willingness to sit in shame without collapsing into either self-destruction or blame. Most can't do it. The false self, the version of them that's charming, magnetic, endlessly self-assured, was constructed precisely to avoid that feeling. So, the moment shame creeps close, the moment your absence forces them near that edge, the psyche does what it's always done. It defends, it deflects, it finds someone new to blame, someone new to charm, someone new to feed the system, so the feeling goes back into hiding. Which means, for many of them, nothing actually changes at all. Not in the way you'd hope. Not in the way that would make the years you spent make sense as some kind of lesson they finally learned. And I want to say this gently, because I know some of you are hoping for a different ending, hoping that somewhere out there, the person who hurt you is lying awake in genuine remorse, finally understanding what they lost. Sometimes that happens. It's rare, but it happens. Growth is possible for anyone, even narcissists, if they're willing to do the excruciating internal work most people never have to do. But you cannot build your healing around waiting for that. You cannot make your peace conditional on their transformation, because their transformation was never your responsibility, and it was never your job to be the sacrifice that finally teaches them to be human. What does change almost universally is something quieter, something that doesn't require their conscious permission. It's the erosion. Every empath who leaves takes something with them that the narcissist didn't know they were relying on until it's gone. A kind of emotional infrastructure. You were the one who remembered their trauma stories and softened the room before they had to explain themselves. You were the one who translated their bad moods to their friends and family so they didn't have to. You were the buffer between who they actually are and how the world experiences them. When that buffer disappears, the world starts to see them more clearly. Not because you told anyone anything. You probably didn't even need to. It's because the performance was never built to run without a stage manager, and you were the stage manager. This is why so many narcissists experience a strange domino effect after an empath leaves. Friendships that once seemed unshakable start to fray. Family members who used to give them the benefit of the doubt start asking harder questions. New romantic partners, without the years of conditioning you endured, see the red flags in weeks instead of years, and leave faster than you ever could have imagined leaving. The absence of your protection doesn't just affect them emotionally, it affects them socially. It affects how the entire world begins to read them. And somewhere in that unraveling, a terrifying realization creeps in. One, most narcissists will fight to their last breath to avoid saying out loud, maybe it wasn't them who was special, maybe it was her, maybe it was him. That thought is unbearable to a person whose entire identity rests on being the exceptional one, the irreplaceable one, the one people are lucky to know. So instead of sitting with it, instead of letting it crack them open into something more honest, most narcissists will bury it under new supply, new stories, new versions of the past where they were the victim, the misunderstood one, the one who tried so hard with someone who just couldn't appreciate them. But burying a truth doesn't kill it, it just waits. And this is the quiet, devastating power of your absence that no confrontation, no argument, no perfectly worded final text message could ever achieve. You don't have to convince them of anything. You don't have to make them see what they did. Time does that. Distance does that. The slow, patient dismantling of a life that was propped up by your presence does that. Without you lifting a single finger, without you spending another ounce of the energy they already took more than their share of. Meanwhile, something else is happening. Something they genuinely never saw coming, because narcissists, for all their strategic manipulation, are remarkably bad at predicting what happens to the people they discard. You're changing too. But not in the way they hoped. Not shattered, not desperate, not waiting by a phone that isn't ringing. You're changing in a way that has nothing to do with them at all anymore. And that, more than anything else, is the ending they never saw coming. At first you don't notice it. Healing rarely announces itself with fireworks. It creeps in through small, unremarkable moments. The first morning you wake up and your chest doesn't tighten before you've even opened your eyes. The first time someone raises their voice near you and your body doesn't brace for impact. The first time you catch yourself laughing, really laughing, and realize you weren't performing it for anyone. You weren't managing anyone's mood. You were just laughing. This is the part of the story narcissists never get to witness, because by the time it happens, you're already gone from the theater of their life. They don't see the empath who used to apologize for taking up space, slowly learning to fill a room without flinching. They don't see the person who used to scan every face for signs of danger, finally learning that not every silence is a storm building. They don't see you becoming, piece by piece, the person you were always meant to be before you spent years shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's chaos. And this is the truth that should sit with you for a long time. Your absence didn't just change them. It changed you first. It had to. Because leaving a narcissist isn't a single decision, it's 1,000 small ones, made every single day. Every time the old patterns whisper that you should reach out, that you should check on them, that you should make sure they're okay. Every time you don't reach out, you're choosing yourself. And that choice, repeated enough times, becomes a completely different person than the one who walked in the door of that relationship believing love meant sacrifice without limit. Here's what almost no one tells empaths recovering from this kind of relationship: your empathy was never the problem. It was never a flaw to be fixed or a weakness to be armored over. The problem was that it had no boundaries, no discernment, no filter for who deserved it. What you're building now, in the quiet, unglamorous work of therapy sessions and journal pages, and slowly rebuilding trust in your own judgment, isn't the death of your empathy. It's the birth of a version of it that finally protects you as fiercely as it once protected everyone else. And somewhere out there, the person who once fed on that empathy is facing a reality they never prepared for. Because here's the cruelest irony of the entire story. The twist that closes the loop, the very thing that made you the perfect target. Your depth, your capacity to see people fully, your refusal to give up on someone even when they gave you every reason to. That thing doesn't disappear when you leave a narcissist. It transforms. It gets sharper. It gets wiser. And the next time someone tries to perform a version of intimacy that isn't real, you'll feel it in your bones before they even finish the sentence. That's what they actually lost. Not just you. Not just the supply. Not just the mirror. Not just the audience for the performance. They lost access to a person who was learning in real time how to spot exactly what they are. And they will never get that back because you don't hand that kind of clarity to someone who spent years proving they didn't deserve it. Meanwhile, their story continues on its own broken loop. New relationships that start with the same intensity, the same love bombing, the same promises whispered in the dark, and end faster and faster each time because the people they choose now don't carry the same wounds you carried, don't have the same conditioning that kept you patient for far too long. Old friendships quietly dissolving under the weight of a personality that was only ever sustainable with a devoted stage manager running interference. A private, unspoken war with a mirror that no longer reflects the story they need it to tell. They will never fully understand what happened. That's perhaps the most tragic part of this entire arc, because understanding would require the one thing their entire psychological architecture was built to prevent: genuine self-reflection without collapse. Some of them will spend the rest of their lives circling that void, filling it with new sources, new stages, new witnesses, never once stopping long enough to ask why the emptiness always comes back, no matter how loud the applause gets. But you don't have to carry that weight anymore. You never had to carry it in the first place. You just didn't know, back then, that it was possible to set it down. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in every word, the empath who gave everything to someone who was constitutionally incapable of giving it back, I want you to hear this clearly. Your absence was never cruelty. It was the most honest thing you ever gave them. It was the truth, delivered without a single word, that some things cannot be sustained by one person's love alone. And if that truth broke something in them, that breaking was never yours to prevent. It was theirs to survive or not. Your job now isn't to wonder whether they've changed. It isn't to check the breadcrumbs they leave on social media, wondering if that caption was about you, if that song was a message, if that sudden reappearance means they've finally learned. Your job is to keep walking toward the life you're building, the one where your empathy has boundaries, where your voice says wait, where your presence is a gift you give, not a resource anyone gets to extract without consequence. Because here's the final truth, the one this entire story has been circling from the very first hook: you were never the one who needed to change. You were whole before you met them, and you are whole now, on the other side of that silence. The only thing that needed to change was the version of you who believed silence meant surrender, who believed walking away meant losing, who believed love was supposed to hurt this much. They never expected your absence to change them forever, but they especially never expected it to finish the work of changing you into someone they can no longer reach, no longer charm, no longer convince that the emptiness they offered was ever love at all. And somewhere in the quiet after all of it, past the wreckage and the waiting and the war they're still fighting alone with their own reflection, you'll realize the ending was never about them changing at all. It was about you finally becoming someone they could never break again.